Hey guys, welcome back to the Paladin's Alliance. It's been quite a bit of time since I've done like a solo video of mine. I guess the Patreon video counts, but I want to do an actual like video before the season starts and whatnot. It's been a really nice player break. We've had a lot of different roster moves to kind of happen and undergo themselves as of right now. And before Blast Fall actually begins, I want to do a video where we basically dissect who I think the biggest winners and losers are prior to the actual start of this fall season, this fall winter season, and whatnot. And basically, I've figured out four of my biggest winners, three of my biggest losers, and then two that I'm kind of like really on the fence about and that I've been thinking about for quite some time that I haven't really come down on either way. Like there are pros and cons for both, but we'll get into that later on. So we'll just get it underway, and I'll start it off with FaZe being one of the biggest winners in this offseason, just because, look, I think the roster moves that have happened all around FaZe haven't been all that impressive, and for that reason, it's like, what are they actually here to be afraid of? I guess Navi is the only other team in contention, but when you look at the facts, and that is how they performed at S Plus tournaments, and you take out the blips being IM Dallas, right? They have won all of those tournaments, and all the tournaments that they've been eliminated from, they eventually lose to the champion of that said tournament. So even at Blast Spring Finals, they lost to Navi, and I think that was the one that they got most handily defeated in. Cloud9 really had to earn that win in IM Dallas, but other than that, like, there are no real roster moves here that I can confidently say that, hey, FaZe, they have to look behind their shoulder. There is somebody behind them, or more so like a group of teams that are right behind them. I think it's very handily that they're number one and Navi's number two, and for that reason alone, they are the winners from this offseason, the number one offseason winners in my opinion. And I think we'll definitely see the only thing that can really hurt them at this point is themselves, and we'll see how they actually look out the gates. I'm sure they've been putting in practice, and they should cruise through the fall groups. We'll keep the ball rolling with teams that haven't actually done anything in the offseason, but are winners from this offseason, and that is Navi. I mean, other than the fact that they are securing SDY until Rio, it basically allows them enough breathing room to say, hey, we've given it our fair shot with this lineup, and we haven't been able to win titles, and we have to find the next best replacement. But for right now, Navi looks like one of the teams to beat, if not the team to beat. And we could be living in a very different narrative, all things considered, right now, if you had Navi win a couple rounds on that final decider of Nuke at Cologne. Because, look, they absolutely blazed through the competition in the spring finals, the debut of Electronic as the IGL and SDY in the lineup. And then you look at Cologne, they had this absolutely monstrous run where they were just decimating all of their opponents, especially in the playoffs as well. And I have to say, like, this move of bringing in SDY, I didn't think it would work on paper simply because I thought Electronic's form would drop even more. I didn't think that he had enough of a mind for the game to lead these troops in such an effective manner. But it looks like the synergy that he has with Blade and all the things that Blade has mentioned so far has been coming true, and they actually look like a very deadly squad. And I think that this roster, this lineup, has more potential than the Boomich lineup, frankly, because now you've basically given room away, or you've taken room away from the whole Boomich angle. You've allowed Electron to continue to fragging, reaching career peaks in some senses, and then you allow SDY to also have considerably consistent performances throughout these two big runs that they've had. And you've got a real recipe for success here. The only real threat that they have at this point is FaZe. And even then, it looks like FaZe's kryptonite at this point is potentially Navi. And that, for that reason alone, it's like they've got this great plan for these next couple of months. And if it goes awry, then we can reevaluate. But if not, this is the threat that Navi is trying to pose towards the rest of the world, and I think that they have the ability to do so. I'm still yet to see a real drop-off in tactics and how they like to approach the game with Electronic at the helm, but I think that if that is taken care of, there is no stopping this squad. The firepower is very stacked to the nines. Simple is by far the best player in the world, and for that reason, this team will forever be a big title contender. And as I've spoken about on the NA podcast as well, FaZe and Navi are head and shoulders above the rest of the international stage, and they'll remain there until proven otherwise. So now we're going to get into a bit of a different territory here, where a little bit more of an obvious picks here are FaZe and Navi, just because they are by and large above the rest of the pack. But I want to get into another winner here, which is a little bit more outlandish, but I think has the potential to start rivaling that of a Phaser Navi, and it doesn't seem like it right now, but there are a couple little pieces here that need to come into place, and this could be a really, really threatening squad. And the pickup that I want to actually talk about here is Yekindar to Liquid. Liquid being the winners of this offseason, being able to actually lock down Yekindar for the fall groups, I believe, as far as I can tell, that's what's going to be happening. And if that's the case, right, that's just, first of all, that's one step to having Liquid keep Yekindar long term, which I think overall will be a huge benefit for this team, just because they are in desperate need of that extra bit of firepower after Shox's departure. And now bringing in Yekindar, you have this very, very deadly trio of fraggers of Yekindar, Naf, and Elige, and that isn't even accounting for how good OC played at Cologne as well. And this team looked so deadly at the final tournament of the season, and I think that they looked like really threatening in some points of the tournament. And I think that a couple rounds evaded them against the Moviestar Riders that probably could have been fixed up if they had more time together. You could see that there are a couple rounds here or there, especially on Ancient, where you would have Yekindar kind of a little bit lopsided in how he was actually playing and approaching the game. And that's simply because they just haven't had enough time to actually go through all of these different protocols and ideas that they have on the table, because my God, like the amount of European tactics that they're trying to integrate into this, stuff that Nitro has been trying to do for quite some time. Now he has a very, very efficient person to bring into the fray and bring these ideas to the table and kind of flesh them out and make them actually look good in the server. And then that isn't even actually talking about the brute firepower that Yekindar has as a force, right? And that opener, that fire, that rage that Yekindar has on this team is what exactly I think Liquid needs as a roster. One of the greatest parts of that Grand Slam winning roster was the fact that Stewie brought this kind of flair to the roster and kind of propelled this team to greater heights because of this energy that he brought to the more calmer side of Liquid. And now that you have Yekindar kind of filling those shoes as well, it's just a recipe for success. I think you give Daps and Nitro and Yekindar just a little bit more time, and I think that they can actually get through the fall groups. It doesn't seem like it, but hey, the seeding actually allows them to potentially come in third rather than coming in fourth. I think that they'll be able to handle complexity in the lower bracket final, just because I think that they won't be able to surpass G2, and I think Navi will take care of business against complexity. And then in that single elimination bracket, they should be able to dispatch whoever the fourth place team is in whatever group that they have to play. And then I think they just have to win a couple more BO3s, and they're on the precipice of qualifying for the fall finals. I think they have the pieces to do it, the firepower to do it, and this is a team that has the potential to do a lot of damage in international space. Just give them that little bit more time. So the last one that I wanted to pick 4 winners just so we can have a little bit more positivity in this video as opposed to negativity, because there are a lot of rosters that just kind of had some flimsy moves. But the one that I want to talk about in this situation is OG, which is probably on the most fringe side of winners as compared to all the other orgs that I've picked out here. But the main talking point is, of course, Dexter being signed onto this team and being locked down. And it was a player that honestly, throughout all of the teams, really needed a tier 1 opera. And I think ENCE being the ones that really could have loved having him signed on would have been awesome for this team. But after all, he's gone to OG. They had an incredible spring finals, and this guy was just an absolute demon with that new stand-in smell, so to speak. And everybody wanted them, and so just securing this guy on your team long term alone is a very, very good move, because this guy has the makings of a superstar. He's consistently shown that he can perform at the top level of the game, and for that reason alone, I think OG should be really happy with their offseason to secure him. And we've seen the extent that Dexter's had on all the teams that he's played on, Spirit as well in both iterations, as well as OG the spring finals. But I think the biggest worry that I have for this team is just that the honeymoon phase actually falls away and they aren't able to actually perform consistently at the level that they've showed at the spring finals. It's going to be a tall task because you're going to have Dexter to be at prime form, and you're going to have Neofrag also at that prime form. And whether or not Neofrag has that consistency, that jury is still out on that guy in particular, because we have a very small sample size with Neofrag at the tier 1 level. We have Spring Finals, EPL as well with Sinners. And I don't think that there has been enough proving from Neofrag to suggest that, hey, this guy's here to stay. This guy's going to be outputting a lot of frags for a long time coming. But if that is the case, then we have a twosome that can actually be really deadly for OG and have the potential to actually take down a lot of these big name teams. Now, I think another big question mark for this team is Fiku and Flames, because at this point, there are no excuses for Flames, all things considered. He's had a lot of rocky patches through certain iterations of the OG roster, but your time for quote-unquote developing has kind of come to pass, and I'm expecting you to be the superstar that you were signed on to be in the first place, and if you're not able to do that, then I don't think that you have a place in this roster at this point. He's kind of gone through all of these stages of OG, and at this point, I'm expecting a lot of great things for him, and I want to see him come in all guns blazing. And then you have this incredibly young core led by Nexa, who has the capability to lead these boys. And you got a roster and a core that can last for quite a long time. So the potential for OG has always been there, especially with this trio that's here now. But it's a question of whether or not they can actually chop and change and actually get these results on paper, right? But overall, I think this is the most tentative winner on this list. And I'm hoping the best for OG, because it's been a long time since we've had some real success from this organization. So we'll switch over to the more negative side of this video and talk about the losers of this 2022 season. And we have to talk about probably the most obvious pick out of all of them, and I think it is going to be ENCE, just inevitably. Losing Spinx is such a big hit to this team. Like, you lose such a massive amount of firepower, something that you were kind of desperately needing in this offseason, kind of upgrade with Hades. And I won't be surprised if they don't come back from this, because he was kind of the guy that got him out of these 50-50 situations against some top teams, and the reason why you could potentially count them in for some of these playoff appearances and why they went so deep in some of these tournaments, right? So I think that in and of itself is a huge hit, and whoever they have to pick up, it's going to have to be a player that's a little bit more diamond in the rough. They can't spend that much money, and now you're going to have to rebuild. And for Snappy and Saw here, it's going to be a tough rebuild. And I'm not really sure if they're going to be back to winning titles, or at least being in the conversation to win titles right out the gates. And that alone is just a really worrying sign. I don't know who they're actually going to pick up in this case, but either way, it's going to be considered a downgrade. Very similar to that outsider situation where they had to pick up Norbert and Fame, where that Fame upgrade might have been a decent one over Buster, but the Norbert one will never be an upgrade in the eyes of the fans and the community, because you're losing Yekindar, right? And so you kind of have to figure out how you're going to change your identity and plan accordingly, especially with how much of a rock Spinx was and the pedigree that he kind of carried. So that alone is kind of tilting me towards the loser side, just because the replacement is probably going to drop them down a few pegs for me. Now, the other issue that I have here is I'm not really completely on board with the Sun Pius move as well, due to the fact that I think Hades has a huge clutch factor that is going to be lost on this team, that now you don't really have a player to look towards to be, hey, this is our man, this is going to get us out of these kind of ruts, these 1v2s, these 1v3s that we really need to actually deliver to get us out of these more aggressive ruts that we have. And now you bring in a player, and the big thing that you're dropping Hades for is the consistency factor, right? He's not actually able to deliver in that sense. And in a lot of these tournaments in the last 3 months, his form dropped off. He was clutching very well, but he wasn't actually having that individual flair that we were having from him when they made their statement in the first half of the year. Now you bring in Sun Pius to kind of bolster that consistency level and bring in this firepower that they're desperately lacking. And I think maybe in the short term, it might actually work in their favor. But as far as the consistency is concerned, we got to actually look back as to where he's performing and where his floor is actually dropping, right? And I'll actually just pull up the ratings here just to kind of dissect and see what we're dealing with. He's got a 1.19 rating, a 1.16 rating all time, 1.19 rating in the last 3 months. And that's great and all. He performed very, very well in these last 3 tournaments. He did very well at IEM Cologne, a 1.16 rating. IEM Cologne playing 1.34. ESL Challenger Valencia, 1.3. These slew of tournaments were absolutely fantastic from him. But where I have to look at is the other tournaments where they had actual chances to fight back. In their close qualifier performance, they played 4 maps, they qualified, but he had a 0.84 rating. At IEM Dallas, they played 3 maps, got immediately eliminated, 0.94 rating. Global Esports Tour Dubai, they came 3rd to 4th, but even there, Sunpias had a rating of 0.98. It was more the Mopaz show in that situation. I believe Alex as well. And then after that, you kind of see these dips in performances, right? Like, he doesn't have that kind of flair that Hades was consistently showing in that first bit of the year. And that's my big nervous situation for Sunpias. If he doesn't actually show that consistency, then he's again a liability in that op role that Snappy was kind of looking for quite some time. And also, leaving your countryman, now playing on an English roster, how is it going to affect your short-term and long-term form as a whole, right? So all of these myriads of issues kind of amass on ENCE now, and it's going to be a really, really tough task for them to find that kind of ranking and success that they had prior to these kind of off-season. So I think they're probably, in fact, the biggest loser of this off-season. So maybe we get a little bit controversial now, but I want to talk about Astralis. Right now, I believe they're ranked 4th in the world on HLTV. And I think this is absolute bullshit, and one of the times that I don't believe in this HLTV ranking spot at all, okay? I think this team is entirely fool's gold, and the actual results they have to speak of don't really actually net them too many points in my book. When you look at the tournaments that they actually succeeded in, well, hey, they came 2nd in the Pinnacle Cup Championship. In this tournament, they beat Imperial 2-1 and they beat Big 2-0, and I believe, yeah, this is the tournament where Keto actually stood in for Big, so that wasn't even a legitimate win. And then they lose to Heroic pretty handedly, all things considered. Then you go to the online Rubet Cup where they also got 3rd to 4th, right? Hey, this is like an S tier online tournament, right? Well, they beat Moviestar Riders 2-0. They lose to Cloud9 2-0. They beat Complexity, and that speaks for itself. And 3 maps, all things considered. Forza 2-0, and then they lose to FaZe 2-1. So again, not that impressive, all things considered. They eke out a play-in advancement. They lose to a 0-0 Nation 16-6. They beat Complexity handedly, and then they lose. They barely beat Big as well in a 3-map affair. Now you're at IM Cologne. This is where they did their fantastic run. They beat Furia 2-0. They beat a very fragile Cloud9, which I think is honestly their biggest achievement with this roster yet. But also at the same time, you kind of take it with a grain of salt with Cloud9 being as fragile as they are in these kind of S+ tier tournaments. They get thrashed by FaZe. Then they beat Mouse in the quarterfinals, which is all things considered. I think it was pretty close. Even though the scores might not reflect it, it was a pretty close game. And then they get absolutely destroyed by Navi. And all things considered, right? This was a tournament where I think Zipnix had an outstanding one, and BlameF was doing his more fantastic playmaking tournaments, right? Where he's just putting Astralis on his back and carrying them through. Config had a decent tournament as well. But the big point out here is Zipnix's form at Cologne was an outlier. It will not be replicated, and there's nothing to suggest that it will be replicated. And to me, I think that not making a move in this sense and having their Cologne result being as good as it was is actually giving them false hope, and they will absolutely crash and bomb in these next couple of months, in my opinion. I think sorely missing out on big moves like bringing in Valde for the likes of Zipnix, and then having Device also replacing Farley has this team being absolutely fantastic and absolutely a potential championship winning title contending team. However, not being able to do this, sitting on your laurels, having this false sense of security, all things considered, has me kind of really trying to tell the world my opinion about whether or not this actually logistically will make sense in the future and whether or not they can actually get some results to back it up. I don't think it's possible. I think this is probably my most controversial pick out of all of these winners and losers, but I am not looking forward to this iteration of Astralis any longer. I think I'm pretty much done with it. Okay, so the last one that I've put on my losers list, I have 3 here in total, is going to be the Moviestar Riders, and this is just a unfortunate circumstance to if this Sunpias move is actually going through. That losing Sunpias just decimates your team's momentum that you found since Valencia, right? Like, you had Valencia, you had Cologne as well, and you would potentially have had EPL like almost right out of the gates. But now at this point, you're losing Sun Pius, and now it's just going to be such a difficult rut to get out of with this just pristine lack of firepower, frankly. And bringing in Martineza, I don't think it's going to be something that just right out of the gates it works. I trust Blade Scouting, as I said in the NA podcast that I did this week, but I don't think that it's going to be instant, and I think that there's going to have to be a little bit more time to rebuild and allow this guy to get comfortable, because it's going to be a huge jump from like tier 2 Iberian Counter-Strike to tier 1 international Counter-Strike. It's just going to be a really, really tough task for him. So I don't expect him to be just marvelous out of the gates. And what that does is it puts more pressure on Mopaz to perform, who has done very, very well in tier 1 when he actually did perform at Cologne and Valencia. But look, with players like these who are as aggressive and just balls to the wall as he is, you sort of get boxed into some of these tendencies that it's really hard to get out of. And you can see that there's a lot of tape for Mopaz at this point, that he might get found out. And if that is the case, then the momentum that Moviestar Riders could find even with Mopaz could just absolutely dissipate, and this team just falls away from being relevant in Counter-Strike, and that would be just a real bummer, all things considered. But if Martinez is able to step up, then hey, maybe I might not actually consider them in the losers category. But I have to look at the facts here, and I have to say that Moviestar Riders are considered losers in this situation just because they are losing one of the best operas in the scene as of right now. So these final two teams that I've picked out here are teams that I don't necessarily have a certain place to put them, just because it is just a weird situation to talk about these two teams, and I expect a lot from these two teams. So therefore, the moves that have happened here kind of made me go, what? I in my notes here, I wrote it down as WTF. Just I put winners, losers, WTF, just because I have no idea how to contextualize this. So the first team here is a team that has only had one big playoff appearance, that being the Blast Spring Finals, and that is Vitality. And look, I think that there has always been a lot of promise from Vitality. Like, if you think about it in theory, this should be such an exciting roster to just decimate the opposition. We've thought about it for so long. What if the Prime Astralis core had the potential to go out and play for a different team? What if they played internationally? Like, would they have that same kind of success, or was it just the right place at the right time? And you bring in Dupree, Magisk, and Zonic onto this team, and clearly they've been trying to get these guys to like each other, and they do like each other. And the outside of the server chemistry is just so fantastic. They really love to play with each other. But look, the fact of the matter is that the philosophies of both Zonic and Apex isn't necessarily translating and meshing well on the server, and that's just a fact. You have a more tactical side of Danish Counter-Strike on Vitality, and you have this more brazen, more aggressive and risk-taking side of Apex's French style of Counter-Strike. And I don't think that this meeting of the minds was able to be figured out all that much. The on display communication issues that they have, and these frighteningly bad offensive collapses that I've seen, has me feeling like that fundamentally that this experiment of an international Vitality does not work. And maybe you would want to integrate it with just a completely different set of players, and keep Zywoo and keep Apex and have a different set of players that kind of would buy into more Apex's style. But I don't think that this is going to necessarily work. And look, Masuta was a big problem. You could see that he was having a lot of issues as far as English communication was concerned. He would have more supportive elements, and he wasn't able to get those one kill or those 2 kills necessary in the positions that he played. And as a result, just a lot of positions in maps that they played would just fall as a result. And at this point, I feel like the move of potentially bringing in Spinx is going to be a huge band-aid type of situation. And I don't think that it is a genuine fix for this team. I think that it's a band-aid situation where you have Vitality not necessarily looking like a fundamentally better team. Although they do have more firepower, I don't think it'll be the end-all be-all for all of their problems, and just magically their map pool looks better, their offenses look better, they can just get by through just fantastic CT sides. I don't think that's going to be the case. However, at the same time, I have all of these things to suggest that they're potential losers in this situation. But at the same time, Spinx is still like a top 5 player for me right now. And perhaps that it is a band-aid situation that just works out long term, and they do have crazy CT side to just carry them through and win them tournaments, and the odd just crazy pop-off performances from Zybo on the T side that just lights them up, and then they just have deep runs. Maybe that is the solution, and I just don't know what I'm talking about, and that is the last little step. But to me, right now, it's like that whole juxtaposition and dichotomy that Vitality have right now is why I am still so on the fence here, and I can't necessarily put them into one or the other, and that's why I think they're one of the international rosters that are supposed to contend for titles but haven't necessarily for a long time. But that's why I'm just excited to see this move come to fruition and see how it plays out, adding in a third culture to this team and adding more potential issues for Vitality as a whole. Will it solve everything just by firepower alone? I'm very excited to see how Vitality will play out, debuting at the Blast Fall groups. So the last team that I've put here in my WTF tier of winners and losers is, I'm sure you can figure it out by now if I've talked about Vitality and I haven't talked about the one elephant in the room, and that is obviously G2, who has objectively made the most moves in this offseason. And I don't know if I'm completely on board with all of this. Like, obviously, there aren't many routes that G2 can go that I can confidently say, hey, look, this is a championship winning squad. This is going to do the job, and they're going to start contesting against FaZe and Navi. I don't think there is one solution to it because, look, the roster that they had prior to this should have worked. There shouldn't have been any issues, but it didn't. And their T-sides looked horrible. They didn't look cohesive in any sense of the word. Nico's individual form and his confidence in his own game seemed to have dropped off a cliff. Alexi B's individual performances, that while he never was just the most fantastic jump off the page IGL in terms of fragging, he still had better performances than he did with the roster that was given to him at this point in time. And you had these odd situations where Hunter was carrying in a lot of situations, and that just should never be happening when you have Nico on this team. And honestly as well, like, you'd kind of just expect that after the moment they gathered from Katowice that there is no looking back, but that was, all things considered, a very honeymoon period for G2, and they never had such a performance. And now you bring in JKS and Huxi, and you're potentially saying that that is the solution. And there are sides to this where I'm like, hey, this JKS move is fantastic. You're bringing up the level of the CT anchoring that Jax was struggling with, all things considered, I think very much so. But how is JKS going to feel as far as comfort is concerned? And I think we don't talk about that enough. This guy has to be comfortable in the teams that he's playing in. When he plays with the Aussie boys, that's his home. He knows these players in their ins and outs, and they know him as well, and they give him so much freedom to kind of do what he needs to do, and he has these crazy performances on Renegades and whatnot. And then he moves on over to Complexity, where you're like, hey, this is the kind of make or break for JKS, and he has his chance to be that GOAT Aussie player. And that's where things fall apart. He doesn't get the roles that he wants to. He's put in these precarious situations with COVID and whatnot, and his form drops off. You make him play with FaZe again, where he's very comfortable playing as a stand-in, playing any roles and every roles, but again, the environment is very friendly to him, and that confidence comes through, and he performs very, very well to take his S+ tier tournament of winning Katowice. Now, can he do it on G2, where the environment is we have to win titles, and we have to perform very well? And there's a lot of onus on his shoulders. Hey, I've been signed for some big bucks here. I got to do the damage. I've been bought out for a lot of money from Complexity, and I'm here to do damage. And if he can't do it, look, it's going to tank G2. And I think it's going to be an even more of a liability than anything Jax ever had. And you're also losing that energy that Jax had on this team, that chemistry that he brought to this team. Now it's a little bit more dialed in, a little bit more measured. And we got to see that more energy come out from some of these players. And I don't know who to turn to. And I think that the only person I can really say is Nico. And I'm hoping that we can see that from him. Obviously, the other pickup being Huxi. There's a lot to talk about here, right? There's so many different perspectives. And I think Huxi is the one that has the most amount of complexion to it. Because look, the team that he played with prior was a team that he kind of handpicked everybody that he wanted. All these players from CPH Flames, he was very tight-knit with Vorborg and had all of this say on this team and had this rebuild in mind. And then they qualified for the major once. They qualified for the playoffs of their second go-around. And on paper, yeah, these results are very, very good. They jump off the page magically, right? But this is another can of worms, all things considered, right? You're playing with big name players that Alexi B also couldn't make that jump. Now we have to bring into question, is Hooksy going to make that jump? You have to play with Nico, Hunter, Mondesi, and now JKS as well, all star-studded players in their own right. How is Hooksy going to fare? Is he going to command the respect of his players? Or is he going to be thrown and cast aside and eaten alive by these players and not have his vision brought forward? Is Carlos going to allow his vision to carry out for as long as possible? Or are we going to scrap this 6 months from now, right? So there's a lot on the shoulders of Hooksy as a whole. And I'm hoping that he has the potential to fix up the T sides that I think that he definitely has with the style that G2 wants to go for. I think he has the individual roles that can work with G2 as a whole. And I think that he can work with ENCE pretty well. On paper, again, G2 has a roster that can be amazing, that can be world contending, that can be number one. But as we've seen with the results, they haven't been able to lift the Tier 1 trophy just yet this core. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Can they find that momentum? That's yet to be seen. I'm excited to see what G2 has in store. And that is my winners and losers list and my WTF list as well from this 2022 offseason. It's been a kind of a silent one, all things considered. More often than not in some of the situations that we've had in years past, in off seasons past. But I'm still very, very excited with the storylines that we have, the potential rivalries brewing, and just the tournaments that we have in store. We have Rio on the horizon. I haven't even talked about Furia. What if Furia finds their footing and we have a brand spanking new contender on the horizon, and we see them in the IEM Rio playoffs? Well, that's something that I can really, really look forward to. So there's so much to be excited about heading into this 2022 season. We'll have an NA episode coming out a little bit later. I'll have it all tweeted out, twitter.com/Paladin. Stay tuned for that for all of the updates on scheduling. We won't have it on a regular Monday and then the upload on Tuesday. It'll most likely go live on a Thursday or a Wednesday night. And then I'll also have a new show on the horizon as well. Not on this channel, but you will see news about that in the near future. I've got a couple of teasers planned out with a couple of boys of mine, and look out for that as well. Patreon discussion, if you want to get joined in with that, patreon.com/Paladins Alliance. Get subscribed there. Have some questions being asked. At the end of the month, I will be picking and choosing questions from there. And all that being said, just amazing growth to the channel. We've hitting some just all-time great videos as far as the numbers are for this channel. So I'm just so grateful for you guys. Thank you for subscribing, watching, liking, all that good stuff, leaving criticisms and support down in the comments. Thank you all for all of the support, and I will see you guys shortly for our next iteration of NA. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.